Okay, so like, have you ever thought about how websites remember things? It's kind of wild when you think about it.
Yeah, like how it remembers your username, your order from last week.
Even that, kind of embarrassing comment you left on a video years ago.
Right.
Our deep dive today is all about how a website, specifically one built with PHP, actually talks to a database.
Yeah, using something called MySQL
And luckily for us, we have a great tutorial to help us break it down
from plus2net.com.
called MySQL Installation for Handling MySQL Database with PHP.
Catchy!
So to kick things off, what exactly is MySQL? What's going on under the hood there?
Well, imagine you've got, on the one hand, your website code.
Speaking PHP.
Right, speaking PHP. And then on the other hand, you've got your database speaking MySQL. They need to communicate, but it's like they're speaking two completely different languages.
Right.
Yeah. MySQL is like having a super smooth translator on hand, making sure those conversations go off without a hitch.
So no MySQL, you're basically saying our online lives would fall apart.
Pretty much. You wouldn't be able to log in, make purchases, or even leave comments.
Chaos. Total chaos. And that's where our tutorial swoops in. It wants to make sure that MySQL is installed and ready to roll on your system. They even get into some pretty clever ways to double-check this, right?
Yeah, like using this cool little function called finfo.
Okay, now finfo. It sounds a little intimidating, like something only hardcore coders use.
It's not that scary, I promise. Think of it as like a secret code word that unlocks a detailed report about your PHP setup.
Okay, so what kind of stuff is in this report?
It tells you everything PHP knows. Things like its version number, preferred settings, but most importantly for us, it reveals whether MySQL is installed and whether PHP can actually find it.
Because, I mean, what good is a translator if nobody knows how to get a hold of them?
Exactly.
And if, for some reason, MySQL is MIA, missing in action, the tutorial doesn't leave us hanging.
No way.
It walks us step-by-step through the process of enabling it, right?
Right, and that even includes a trip to the slightly mysterious land of the php.ini file.
Okay, php.ini
Yeah.
sounds kind of techy, doesn't it? Like something only seasoned developers would ever even dare to touch.
Not at all, don't worry. It's simpler than it sounds. It's much less scary than it sounds, I promise. Basically, the php.ini file is like the settings menu for your PHP.
Okay, so instead of messing with, like, complicated lines of code, you just go into the settings.
Exactly. It's a simple text file where you can adjust how PHP behaves. You can tweak things, turn features on or off. It's pretty powerful.
So for our purposes, enabling MySQL in the php.ini file is basically like, what, flipping a switch?
Yeah, exactly. It's like flipping a switch that lets PHP and MySQL finally understand each other, which is actually crucial because in many cases, just having MySQL installed isn't enough. You have to specifically tell PHP, hey, use this to talk to databases. And that's where the php.ini file really comes in handy.
So it's like a little reminder for PHP. But what about situations where you don't have access to the php.ini file? Like what if you're using a shared hosting environment?
Ah, good point. Shared hosting can be a bit tricky.
Yeah, because it's a little more restrictive. Right.
Right, exactly. It's like trying to cook a gourmet meal in a dorm room kitchen. You've got some basic tools, but you might not have full control over everything. And sometimes that php.ini file is off limits.
So are we out of luck? What do we do?
Not at all. The tutorial's got us covered.
Okay, good.
Remember that anyset function we mentioned earlier?
Right, the backup plan.
That's our secret weapon. It basically lets you set some PHP settings directly within your script. So no need to touch the main settings file. You can just slip in a line or two of code within your script and you're good to go.
Oh, that's sneaky.
It's like leaving a sticky note for PHP within your script.
A sticky note. I like it. So even with these limitations, we still have options.
Exactly. Developers need to be adaptable, and that's something I really appreciate about this tutorial. It doesn't just stop at installing and enabling MySQL, it actually dives into the code.
Oh, yeah. They actually give us some real-world examples to look at.
Yeah, which is awesome. It's one thing to talk about this concept of MySQL as a translator, but it's a whole other thing to actually see the code that makes the magic happen.
Right. So what's it look like?
Well, they break down a simple PHP script showing you step-by-step how to connect to a MySQL database using your database credentials.
So that would be like your username and password.
Exactly. You need those to access the database. They're like your digital key card. And they also show you how to specify things like the database host, the name of the specific database you're trying to access, that kind of thing.
So it's like you're telling PHP, okay, use MySQLi, then go to this address, find this database, and here's the secret password to get in.
You got it. And the cool thing is, once you understand this basic structure, this little bit of code, you can
Yeah.
use it for all sorts of different database
So
interactions.
it's like the bedrock.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much happens behind the scenes every time we use a website. Like when you think about updating your profile or leaving a comment or even just browsing products online.
It's mind-boggling. All those interactions are being handled by code, talking to a database, all thanks to MySQLi.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me, the tutorial, it doesn't just talk about using PHP, right? They also get into using the command line to install MySQLi.
That's right. It's another useful tool to have in your kit. Now, I know the command line might seem a little intimidating to some.
It used to terrify me. I pictured like a hacker in a movie every time I saw that black screen with the flashing cursor.
I totally get it. It definitely has that mysterious aura. But honestly, it's a super efficient way to do certain tasks, especially for server management. It's like taking a shortcut.
Okay, you've convinced me. Maybe we need to do a deep dive on the command line sometime.
Sounds like a plan.
But for now, let's zoom back out. We've covered what MySQL is, how it works as a translator between R code and databases, the different ways to install and enable it, and even got a glimpse of the code itself. It's been pretty amazing.
It has. This tutorial was a goldmine of information.
It really was. So for someone who maybe isn't a developer but just wants to understand how websites work, what's the key takeaway from all this?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is realizing how much complexity there is behind even the simplest interactions on a website. Clicking a button or loading a page involves a whole symphony of code and data seamlessly working together.
It's like we're peeking behind the curtain and seeing all the gears turning, and MySQL is a key part of that intricate machinery.
Well said. It really is. And without it, websites would be much less dynamic and way less personalized.
Which, let's be honest, would make the internet a lot less fun.
For sure.
But, as always, we like to leave our listeners with something to think about. We talked about getting MySQLi set up and working its magic, but what about security?
Ah, yes, security. That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Because if we're talking about databases with potentially sensitive information, we need to make sure they're locked down tight.
Yeah,
Like you were saying earlier, only people with the right credentials should be able to get in.
exactly. Which brings up a whole other world of best practices, encryption, security protocols.
Ooh, sounds like a topic for another deep dive. But until then, thanks for joining us on this adventure into the world of MySQLi. Happy coding, everyone, and stay curious.